All 8 need to be terminated by end of day, non-negotiable. The words on my computer monitor burned into my retinas as I read the email from Paxson, our chief operating officer. My entire division, supposedly underperforming according to reports I'd never seen, was to be eliminated. Today, through the glass partition, I watched my team working diligently. Maeve was reviewing blueprint calculations for the green initiative that had won us 3 industry awards. Bryn and Lyle were deep in conversation about optimization strategies that had saved the company millions. Ellis typed furiously, likely finalizing the presentation that would revolutionize our supply platform. These people weren't underperforming, they were exceptional. The follow-up email arrived with 8 separation packets, each containing fabricated performance reviews, work never submitted, deadlines never missed, goals never established, but somehow unfulfilled. Someone had meticulously constructed a paper trail of incompetence that didn't exist. My phone buzzed. "Kaida, can you come to the executive suite?" It was Willa from HR, her voice artificially sweet. Upstairs, Paxson didn't even look up from his tablet when I entered. Willa sat beside him, a stack of papers between them. "We need to discuss timeline and messaging," Paxson said. "The separation must appear performance-based, not a layoff. Legal is concerned about optics." "These reports are fiction," I said, placing the packets on the table. "My team exceeded every target this quarter." Paxson finally looked at me, eyes narrowing. "Your loyalty should be to this company, not your subordinates. My loyalty is to the truth, and the truth is, these people have delivered exceptional results." Willa cleared her throat. "The decision isn't up for debate. We've prepared scripts for the termination meetings." She slid a folder toward me. I opened it to find 8 identical termination scripts, with only the names changed: cold, clinical, cruel. "And if I refuse?" Paxson's smile was thin. "Then you'll join them, without the generous severance we're prepared to offer you for handling this." Discreetly. The subtext was clear: fire them or be fired. Back at my desk, I watched my team through the glass. Their lives were about to implode because of corporate politics I couldn't yet fully comprehend. At noon, Maeve knocked on my door. "Team lunch?" she asked, but her expression faltered when she saw my face. "What's wrong?" The others gathered behind her. 8 brilliant minds, 8 careers, built on integrity and diligence. "Close the door," I said. Their faces registered alarm as I explained the situation without revealing the termination order. "They're saying we failed to meet performance standards. All of us. They want changes by end of day." The color drained from Lyle's face. "But we just delivered the Bennett proposal 3 days early. And the quarterly numbers were the best in company history," Ellis added, voice breaking. I looked at their bewildered faces. "I need until 5 o'clock. Don't discuss this with anyone. Trust me." After they filed out, I opened my bottom drawer and removed a leather journal. Inside were notes I'd been taking for months: odd directives, questionable decisions, restructuring that made no sense. The truth crystallized as I reviewed the timeline. 3 weeks ago, my team had identified critical flaws in the expansion strategy Paxson had championed to the board. We'd prepared analysis showing the initiative would collapse under its own weight within 6 months. When I presented our findings, Paxson had dismissed them. The next day, our access to certain systems was restricted. Now this. My phone lit up with a text from Juniper, our biggest client's procurement director. "Heard rumors about restructuring. Is your team safe? Call me." I stared at the message. Then I made my decision. The next 4 hours were a blur of calls and messages, all sent from my personal phone. At 4:30, I gathered my team. "Grab your things. We're going to the quarterly all-hands meeting in the main conference center." "But we weren't invited," Bryn said. "We are now," I replied, checking my watch. "And we won't be alone." Before I continue, if you're enjoying this story, please tap the like button and subscribe to support the channel. Your comments mean everything. Tell me if you've ever faced workplace injustice like this. Now, back to what happened next. My name is Kaida Mercer. Until that morning, I was director of strategic operations at one of the largest companies in our industry. I'd built my division from 3 people to 8 over 5 years, hiring only the best. We were the problem solvers, the ones executives called when initiatives faltered. I grew up watching my mother struggle after being wrongfully terminated from her teaching position of 15 years. The experience taught me that corporate loyalty flows in one direction unless you create consequences for betrayal. When I was hired, the company was struggling with innovation. My background in systems design and organizational psychology made me valuable as they tried to modernize. I assembled my team carefully, diverse thinkers who challenged assumptions and delivered results. For years, we operated below executive radar, fixing broken processes and strengthening foundations. Our work wasn't flashy, but the numbers spoke for themselves. Efficiency up, costs down, client retention at record levels. Everything changed when Paxson arrived 18 months ago. The new COO came with bold promises about transformation and disruption. The board was entranced by his confidence and pedigree. His first act was creating an innovation council, staffed with his former colleagues. Their proposals were ambitious, but disconnected from operational realities. My team couldn't implement their ideas without significant modifications. Tensions simmered beneath professional courtesies. Paxson wanted yes people. I led critical thinkers. He prioritized optics. We focused on outcomes. The breaking point came when the Innovation Council unveiled their global expansion strategy. The plan involved simultaneous market entries across 3 continents with unproven systems and untested protocols. Run the numbers, I told my team. Every scenario, every variable. For 2 weeks, they analyzed data, built models, and tested hypotheses. The results were unequivocal. The strategy wouldn't work. Key assumptions were flawed, resource allocations insufficient, and timelines unrealistic. I compiled their findings into a comprehensive report with alternative approaches. Following protocol, I shared it with Paxson before the executive committee meeting. His response was immediate. "This stays between us," he said, dropping the report on his desk without reading it. "The strategy has board approval. Your job is implementation, not critique. With respect, these projections show potential losses exceeding 40 million. We have a responsibility." "Your responsibility is to your chain of command," he interrupted. "This conversation is over." I left his office troubled but determined. The next day, I presented our findings to the executive committee. Despite his warning, the CFO asked pointed questions. 2 VPs requested additional analysis. For a moment, I thought data would prevail over politics. Then Paxson spoke. "Kaida's team sometimes gets caught in analytical paralysis. Their models are theoretical. Our strategy is market-tested." That wasn't true, but he said it with such conviction that doubts crept into the room. The meeting ended with a consensus to proceed as planned. Over the following weeks, subtle retribution began. My team's meeting invitations disappeared. Our project requests faced unprecedented scrutiny. Resources we needed were suddenly unavailable. I documented everything while maintaining outward professionalism. When clients asked about changes they noticed in our responsiveness, I blamed system upgrades rather than internal obstruction. Then came that fateful morning and the termination order. What executives didn't realize was how deeply connected my team had become to our client partners. We weren't just vendors, we were trusted advisors who had saved them from costly mistakes. As we walked toward the conference center that afternoon, Ellis whispered, "What exactly is your plan?" I checked my watch again. Justice. The quarterly all-hands meeting was already underway when the side doors opened. Paxson was mid-presentation about the expansion strategy, gesturing toward optimistic projections that bore no resemblance to reality. He faltered when we entered, confusion crossing his face. His expression transformed to alarm when the main doors opened and 12 people in business attire walked in. The decision-makers from our 7 largest clients. The room fell silent as they took seats reserved for executives. I felt hundreds of eyes following me as I walked to the stage uninvited. "Since we're discussing the future," I said, plugging my laptop into the display system, "our client partners expressed interest in seeing all available data. In the spirit of transparency, I invited them to join us." The CFO half rose from his chair. "This isn't appropriate." "Actually," interrupted a woman in a charcoal suit, "we specifically requested this meeting. I'm Nydia, Chief Procurement Officer at Verdant Group. We represent over 60% of this company's revenue, and we have concerns about the viability of this strategy." Paxson's face reddened. "This is an internal company meeting. We can schedule appropriate." "We've seen both proposals," said another client, a silver-haired man from our oldest account. "We're here to discuss which one will determine our continued partnership." The board chairman stood up. "Perhaps we should move to the executive conference room to discuss." "No," said Nydia firmly. Transparency got us here. Transparency will resolve this. She nodded to me. Please proceed. I stood at the podium, adrenaline masking the tremor in my hands. The conference room had never felt so charged. Hundreds of employees watching, executives frozen in their seats, and our most valuable clients demanding answers. Let me be clear, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. My team identified critical flaws in the proposed expansion strategy. Our analysis shows it cannot succeed as designed. The projector displayed our data, not the sanitized version from Paxson's presentation, but the unvarnished truth. Market penetration projections that defied logic, resource allocations that couldn't possibly support the timeline, cost estimates that somehow ignored basic economic principles. Based on comprehensive modeling, this strategy will fail within 6 months and cost approximately $43 million, I continued, advancing to the next slide. However, we've developed an alternative approach that achieves the same objectives with significantly reduced risk. Maeve stepped forward, explaining the modified implementation plan. Lyle followed with revised financial projections. One by one, my team presented their expertise with confidence born from absolute competence. Paxson's face transformed from anger to something more dangerous. Calculation. He leaned toward the board chairman, whispering urgently. The chairman cleared his throat. While this is certainly informative, this meeting isn't the appropriate forum for debate. We appreciate our clients' concerns, but this isn't merely concern, interrupted Juniper, rising from her seat. As procurement director for our largest client, her words carried weight that made executives squirm. This is due diligence. My company commits over $30 million annually to your services. If this expansion proceeds as originally planned, we have serious doubts about resource allocation to our account. Murmurs spread through the room. Employees exchanged glances. This wasn't just office drama anymore. This was existential threat. Furthermore, Juniper continued, we've reviewed both strategies thoroughly. The alternative presented by Kaida's team aligns with our needs while supporting your growth objectives. Our continued partnership depends on its adoption. 6 other client representatives stood in succession, each echoing similar sentiments. The message couldn't have been clearer. Proceed with Paxson's plan and lose your biggest customers. The CFO whispered something to the board chairman, who nodded grimly. Perhaps a brief recess is in order, he announced. We'll reconvene in 15 minutes. As the room emptied, Willa from HR approached me, eyes wide. What have you done? She hissed. My job, I replied simply. My team gathered around me, a mixture of shock and admiration on their faces. None of them had known about the termination order, only that their performance had somehow been called into question. Were they really going to fire us? Ellis asked, the reality dawning. I nodded. By end of day, with fabricated cause, Bryn's eyes widened. That's why you couldn't access the shared drive yesterday. They were altering our submission records. Are we going to lose our jobs anyway? Lyle asked, voicing everyone's fear. I don't know, I admitted. But if we do, it won't be in darkness, and it won't be with our professional reputations destroyed. The executive team didn't return after 15 minutes, or 30. At the 1-hour mark, an assistant appeared, requesting the clients and myself in the boardroom. My team exchanged nervous glances as I followed her. The boardroom atmosphere was glacial. 9 executives sat on one side, 7 clients on the other, with 3 empty chairs between them. I took the middle seat in this no-man's land. The board chairman spoke first. This situation has clearly escalated beyond internal matters. Our clients have made their position known. Before we proceed, we need to understand exactly what transpired. Paxson leaned forward. What transpired is insubordination. Kaida was instructed to implement necessary personnel changes. Instead, she orchestrated this ambush. Personnel changes? Nydia asked sharply. You mean terminating the entire strategic operations team? The chairman shifted uncomfortably. We were addressing performance concerns. Fabricated concerns, I interjected, placing a folder on the table. These are the actual performance metrics for my team over the past 18 months, verified by system logs and client satisfaction surveys. Next to them are the altered evaluations created this week to justify immediate termination. The CFO opened the folder, frowning as he reviewed the documents. This began 3 weeks ago, I continued, immediately after we presented analysis showing the expansion strategy's fundamental flaws. Our access was restricted, our communications monitored, and finally, termination orders were issued this morning. That's an interesting narrative, Paxson said, his voice dangerously calm, but it doesn't change the chain of command or the expectations of loyalty to this company. Loyalty? Echoed the silver-haired client. We've worked with Kaida's team for years. Their loyalty to effective business practices saved us millions. That's why we're here. The room fell silent as the board chairman conferred quietly with the other executives. Finally, he addressed the clients. We value your partnerships immensely. Perhaps there's been a communication breakdown. If implementing the modified strategy would address your concerns. With the original team intact, Juniper interjected. Of course, the chairman conceded, though his expression suggested otherwise. When the meeting concluded, the messaging was clear. The expansion would proceed according to the modified plan, led by my team. The clients departed satisfied, and I returned to tell my team their jobs were safe. But something felt wrong. The capitulation had been too easy, the promises too smooth. That night, I couldn't sleep. The victory felt hollow, fragile. I replayed the day's events, searching for what I'd missed. At 2 a.m., a text message from an unknown number confirmed my fears. Watch your back. Board emergency session tomorrow. Paxson has a plan. The next morning, I arrived early to find my security badge deactivated. A security guard escorted me to HR, where Willow waited with a thin smile. The board has concerns about your actions yesterday, she said. You've been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. And my team? They'll report to interim leadership while we evaluate next steps. The subtext was clear. Divide and conquer. Isolate me, then dismantle everything. As security walked me out, I passed Maeve in the hallway. Her eyes widened at the escort, but I shook my head slightly. Not here, not now. Outside, I sat in my car, staring at the building that had been my professional home for 5 years. My phone buzzed with messages from my team. Before I could respond, another text from the unknown number. North parking garage, level 3, 10 minutes. Curiosity overrode caution. I drove to the specified location, parking near the stairwell. A few minutes later, a luxury sedan pulled up beside me, the window lowered to reveal the board chairman himself. Get in, he said. We need to talk. Heart pounding, I complied. He drove in silence until we reached a small cafe, several blocks away. Once seated with coffee, he spoke. What happened yesterday was unprecedented. So was fabricating reasons to fire an entire department, I countered. He nodded slowly. I'm not defending those actions. What concerns me is the larger picture. He leaned forward. Paxson didn't act alone. 3 board members supported the expansion strategy, despite knowing its flaws. This wasn't a simple case of one executive's ego. This was systemic. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm retiring next quarter. My legacy shouldn't be a failed strategy that bankrupts a 100-year-old company. He sipped his coffee. Tell me honestly, did you know the clients would threaten to walk? I suspected some would. I didn't orchestrate their response. No, but you created the conditions. He studied me. That was either brilliant strategy or reckless gambling. It was necessity. My team didn't deserve destruction for doing their jobs well. He nodded thoughtfully. Here's what happens next. Your administrative leave continues through the week. The board meets again Friday to determine next steps. Paxson is pushing for termination with cause, not just for you, but eventually your entire team. My stomach twisted. And you're telling me this because sometimes the company needs saving from itself. He stood to leave. What you do with this information is your choice. But if I were you, I'd be very thorough in my preparations for Friday's meeting. After he left, I sat immobile, mind racing. This wasn't over. It was barely beginning. My team's futures still hung in the balance, and now I was on the outside with limited options. My phone buzzed with a message from Bryn. Emergency team meeting. My apartment, 7 p.m. Urgent. My phone buzzed with a message from Bryn. When I arrived that evening, I found all 8 team members, huddled in Bryn's living room, faces grim. They're splitting us up, Lyle said without preamble. Reassignments came through this afternoon. Different departments, different buildings, and they've revoked our access to the project files, Ellis added. Everything we've worked on for the past 3 months, gone. Maeve pushed a laptop toward me. But not everything. We've been making local copies for months. Standard practice after the Johnson project disappeared mysteriously last year. I scrolled through the files, complete records of our work, unaltered and date-stamped. There's more, Bryn said. Juniper called me today. The clients are forming a consortium to address service continuity concerns. They've requested a joint meeting with the board on Friday, the same day as my hearing. So what's our next move? Asked Ellis. They've isolated you, and they're dismantling us. How do we fight this? 7 anxious faces turned to me, waiting for answers. The responsibility was crushing. These people had trusted me with their careers, and now everything was unraveling despite our apparent victory. I closed my eyes briefly, thinking of my mother all those years ago, broken by a system designed to crush dissent. When I opened them again, determination had replaced uncertainty. We need to understand what's really happening, I said. This isn't just about an expansion strategy or performance reviews anymore. Something bigger is at stake. Like what? Lyle asked. I don't know yet, but between now and Friday, we're going to find out. I took a deep breath, and then we're going to make sure the truth can't be buried again. As we talked into the night, piecing together fragments of information, patterns began emerging. Budget discrepancies, missing approvals, transactions that defied standard protocols. Look at this, Maeve said suddenly, pointing to her screen. The offshore vendor for the expansion. Trace the ownership structure. We gathered around as she followed the corporate trail through subsidiaries and holding companies until finally reaching the end. That can't be right, Ellis whispered, but it was. And suddenly, everything made horrible, perfect sense. I stood up, mind reeling with implications. We need to move quickly. We have less than 48 hours to compile everything before the board meeting. Will it be enough? Bryn asked quietly. I looked at each of them. Brilliant minds, who deserved better than becoming collateral damage in corporate warfare. It has to be, I replied, because on Friday, only one side of this conflict will still have careers when the dust settles. None of us slept that night, working furiously to assemble the puzzle pieces into a cohesive picture. By dawn, we had our answer and our strategy. What we didn't have was certainty that it would work. Friday morning felt surreal. After 3 days of administrative leave, I drove back to the office for a meeting that would determine not just my fate, but my entire team's future. The parking garage was unusually full for 7:30 a.m. Board meetings rarely drew crowds. As security escorted me to the executive floor, I noticed the heightened activity. Staff members huddled in whispered conversations, glancing my way with mixed expressions of sympathy and curiosity. Quite the audience gathering, my escort commented as we entered the elevator. Board meetings aren't usually standing room only. Special circumstances, I replied, gripping my leather portfolio tighter. The elevator opened directly into the reception area of the boardroom suite. Willa from HR waited, her professional smile strained. The board is ready for you, she said. They've requested this be a closed session. I nodded, unsurprised. That won't work today. Her smile faltered. Excuse me? Before I could answer, the lobby doors opened. My entire team walked in, followed by representatives from our 7 major clients. Behind them came 3 people in suits I didn't recognize. What is this? Willa demanded, stepping between me and the boardroom doors. Witnesses, I answered simply, moving past her. Inside, 14 board members sat around the massive conference table. Paxson occupied the right hand of the chairman, his expression darkening when he saw who followed me in. This is a closed session, he snapped. Only Miss Mercer is authorized to attend. Nydia stepped forward. As joint signatory on contracts representing 63% of your annual revenue, I believe we have standing. And as counsel for these clients, added one of the unfamiliar suits, I'd advise against excluding them given the nature of today's discussion. The chairman's gaze swept over the assembled group, then settled on me. You've been busy during your administrative leave. I've been thorough, I corrected, placing my portfolio on the table. A tense silence followed before the chairman nodded curtly. Very well. Additional chairs, please. Once everyone was seated, he continued. We're here to address Miss Mercer's conduct regarding confidential personnel matters and subsequent actions that potentially violated numerous company policies. Before you proceed, interrupted the third unfamiliar visitor, I should introduce myself. I'm Thea Ward, senior investigator with the Securities Exchange Commission. These proceedings may become relevant to an ongoing investigation. The blood drained from Paxson's face. What investigation? The chairman demanded. Theo smiled thinly. That's what we're here to establish. In the stunned silence that followed, I opened my portfolio and removed a stack of documents. 3 months ago, I began. My team was tasked with analyzing implementation requirements for the global expansion strategy. What we discovered went beyond operational concerns. I placed the first document on the table. The primary contractor for the expansion infrastructure is Highland Solutions, a company incorporated 6 months ago, with no prior projects or proven capabilities. New vendors aren't unusual for new initiatives, Paxson interjected, but his voice lacked conviction. Highland Solutions, I continued as if he hadn't spoken, is owned by Meridian Holdings, which, through a series of shell companies, is owned by 3 individuals. I slid forward 3 more documents, each showing ownership trails through subsidiaries and investment vehicles. Tracing these ownership structures required significant effort, I said. Fortunately, my team specializes in detailed analysis. The beneficial owners of the enterprise slated to receive $43 million in expansion contracts are Wesley Paxson, board member Gerald Turner, and board member Antonia Reyes. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. The named board members shifted uncomfortably while others leaned forward, examining the documents. This is absurd, Paxson sputtered. These are legitimate business interests disclosed in my conflict statement. Interesting you should mention that. I removed another document from my portfolio. This is your conflicts disclosure from October. Highland Solutions isn't listed. Neither is Meridian Holdings, or any of the 7 intermediary companies. The CFO, who had been silent until now, spoke up. These are serious allegations that require thorough investigation before. We've completed that investigation, Ellis interrupted, stepping forward to hand USB drives to each board member. These contain comprehensive documentation of the ownership structures, fund transfers establishing initial capitalization of Highland Solutions, and communications between the principals. How did you access these records? Demanded Turner, one of the implicated board members. We didn't hack anything, if that's your concern, Maeve replied coolly. Everything here was obtained through legal channels, public records, and analysis of the vendor onboarding documentation that your own people provided during standard due diligence. The real question, I continued, isn't how we found this information. It's why it wasn't disclosed. The expansion strategy wasn't just flawed operationally. It was designed to funnel company resources into private interests while guaranteeing its architects golden parachutes when it inevitably failed. The chairman's expression was thunderous as he turned to Paxson. Is this true? This is a mischaracterization, Paxson insisted. Highland was selected through proper channels. By a committee you appointed, Bryn interjected, whose members received consulting contracts with Meridian Holdings 2 weeks after approving the vendor selection. The SEC investigator leaned forward. I'd be very interested in seeing those consulting agreements. The next hour unfolded like a meticulously choreographed ballet of evidence and testimony. My team presented not just the self-dealing scheme, but the elaborate effort to discredit and remove anyone who might expose it. The performance evaluations were altered, Lyle explained, displaying before and after screenshots of database entries. System logs show these changes happened after hours using administrative credentials issued to Willa's terminal. Willa gasped. I was told it was a system update. Then there's the matter of our termination, I added. Eliminating an entire department for identifying conflicts of interest presents serious whistleblower protection issues. Not to mention contractual implications, added Juniper. Our service agreements specifically name Kaida's team as relationship managers. Terminating them would constitute material breach of contract. By noon, the picture was unmistakable. Paxson and 2 board members had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to profit from a doomed expansion, then tried eliminating anyone who identified the conflicts. The chairman called for a brief recess. When we reconvened 30 minutes later, 3 seats at the table were empty. Paxson, Turner, and Reyes had been asked to leave the building pending formal investigation. The board extends its profound apologies, the chairman began, looking genuinely shaken. We've notified corporate counsel and will cooperate fully with any SEC investigation. As for immediate actions, he turned to me. Miss Mercer, your administrative leave is terminated, effective immediately. The board requests you accept appointment as interim chief operations officer while we conduct a proper search. The offer stunned me, and my team, will remain intact, with immediate promotions and appropriate compensation adjustments to reflect their extraordinary service to this company. After the formal meeting adjourned, the chairman approached me privately. "This wasn't what I expected when I suggested thoroughness," he admitted. "What did you expect? A negotiated settlement, not public execution." He shook his head. "You realize Paxson's career is over? Turner and Reyes will likely resign within days. They tried to destroy 8 careers to hide their corruption," I replied evenly. "Actions have consequences." He studied me for a long moment. "The board will ratify your appointment next week. Try not to overthrow the entire executive team before then." The aftermath unfolded rapidly. Paxson resigned that evening, citing personal reasons. Turner and Reyes followed over the weekend. The SEC investigation became formal the following Tuesday. Within a month, the modified expansion strategy launched successfully under my team's guidance. At our celebration dinner, Ellis raised a toast to Kaida, who taught us that even in corporate America, justice sometimes prevails. "It wasn't justice," I corrected, looking around at the team that had become family. "It was truth. Documenting, preserving, and presenting the unvarnished truth when it mattered most." Maeve smiled, "And a healthy dose of courage." "That too," I conceded. "But remember, the victory wasn't destroying careers. It was protecting integrity, both ours and the company's." 6 months later, the board made my appointment permanent. The former chairman, now retired, sent a single-line email. The company needed saving. It found the right savior. I keep that message as a reminder that in the corporate battlefield, survival isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about choosing which principles are worth fighting for, then having the courage to stand your ground when the order comes to compromise them. What would you have done in my position? Would you have risked everything to protect your team and expose corruption? Or would you have followed orders and preserved your own position? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe for more real workplace experiences. And remember, sometimes the most professional thing you can do is refuse to participate in unprofessional behavior, no matter who's giving the orders.